Welcome to Mindset Tools Mastery. I'm David Phelan. In this presentation, we're going to focus on how to support the new beliefs you're trying to adopt. So to get ready, it'll be helpful to think about challenges that you might be having or goals that you're pursuing, particularly anything in which you're not currently getting the results that you really want. So take a moment and just think about that. What are you pursuing right now? Again, anything where you're not currently getting the results that are important to you. And as in the past, it would be helpful if you are prepared to write a few things down. If you have any questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to add them in the comments section so that I can answer them as we go along, or I'll come back to them at the end of the recording. Okay, so in this presentation, we're going to be addressing finding references to support the beliefs that we have and that we're trying to adopt. But in order to talk about this, I just kind of want to briefly recap what we've covered so far. So in presentations prior to this, we talked about identifying a clear and compelling vision for what you want. And as you're trying to adopt a new belief, if your vision for what you want is not clear and compelling, then you might find working with beliefs difficult. So you might want to go and check out that presentation. And then in this particular series, in part one, we clarified some misconceptions about how our mind works, and particularly related to beliefs. And then we addressed how to identify the mindset that's necessary to get the results that you really want. And then also what to do if you're having trouble believing that the results that you want are possible. In the second part in the series, we continued developing the ideas about adopting beliefs, and we talked about different stages of beliefs and how to identify the stage of belief that you're in, as well as how to move through the stages so that you can get the results that you really desire. So in this presentation, again, we're going to work on finding support for the beliefs that you're trying to adopt to increase your sense of certainty. And then in our next presentation, we're going to talk about how to select the beliefs that are most helpful to you. So once you know how to adopt new beliefs and how to support them, virtually any belief becomes possible. So if you know that, then sometimes it's challenging to know which belief to choose from if there are many beliefs that you could adopt. So in that presentation, we'll talk about how you know what belief to select. So again, in this presentation, we're going to be focusing on finding support for new beliefs. And when I started developing these presentations, finding support, this particular part of it was what I really wanted to be able to address, because so many of my clients get stuck with this. And so it's the part that I wanted to be able to illustrate. But what I realized is if you're hearing these ideas for the first time, if you didn't have the background of those other presentations, you might not be sure exactly what I'm talking about. And so I realized that one presentation would need to become 4 presentations. But I'm excited. This is what I really wanted to be able to get to. So I'm excited that we're here, and then we can share these ideas. So by now you know that beliefs are not in the category of what is true or false, but what is, the category is it supported or not supported? Now that's great if you know how to actually find the support that you're looking for. So you're probably familiar with the idea of belief tables, where the belief is like the top of the table and the references or the supports are like the legs of a table. And so the idea is if you have enough legs, and if the legs are substantial enough, the belief stands. And if there aren't enough legs or they're not substantial enough, then the belief doesn't stand. So the legs are the references. And so as we talk about the references today, that's what we're talking about, the legs for the belief. One of my clients calls them the pillars for her beliefs, right? So in order to illustrate that, I'd like to start with a story about a client that I'm working with right now. And what he is trying to do is to get a job, get work in a new industry. and he was setting goals related to this. But what I noticed was that after several sessions of us meeting, he was getting clearer about what he wanted and why he wanted it, but he wasn't taking action. And so he realized that his belief about his ability to get a job in this industry wasn't strong enough. There wasn't enough certainty about it. And so we worked on supporting his belief, and the belief in particular that we were working on was it's easy to get this position. And so that was very different from where we started. Where we started was, this is a difficult industry to break into. I'm going to have a hard time doing this. So that was his old belief, and the belief that he wanted to adopt was, it's easy to get this position. So in a little bit, I'm going to come back to the story to talk more about how we did it. But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. How do you shift from an old belief to a new belief that supports you in the result that you are pursuing? So for now, what I'd like to do is to go through some of the typical beliefs that my clients are trying to adopt, either in their personal life or their professional lives. And as I go through these, I want you to think about the belief that you're trying to adopt. And is it similar to these, or is it different? So typical beliefs might include things like, I can make an impact in the world. Some of my clients are like questioning, do they really, have the ability to make a difference? Or I can turn this around. If they're struggling at home, or they're struggling in their business, can they turn things around? So they want to adopt that belief, I can turn this around. Or a great relationship is possible. Or sustainable income is possible. Or maybe it's something like, I have something unique to offer. Again, that could be in a relationship, it could be in business. The belief might be something like, this opportunity, this is an opportunity rather than a setback. So sometimes we go through challenging things, and our mindset about it makes a difference in how we go through the situation. Or maybe the belief that somebody's trying to adopt is something like, I can set and achieve the goals that are important to me. Or maybe it's, where I am right now is the perfect place for me to be. If it's a new business or a new situation, it might be something like, people will purchase my offer. Or maybe it's, I am more than the sum of my successes and failures. Maybe the belief is, I have the background to deliver value. Or maybe it's something like, I can overcome my fear of what people think of me. My offer is worth the price I'm charging, might be a belief that somebody is working on. Or it might be more interpersonal related, like people do the best they can with what they have to work with. Maybe it's, I can build a successful business, or I will be okay on my own, which again could be related to relationships. It could be leaving from their family of origin, or it could be even going off on their own in business. Other beliefs might be things like, I have enough time, or I have enough money, or my value is priceless. All of these are beliefs that are similar to ones that my clients are working on. The things that come up in my work can be of all different varieties, and these are a very typical sampling of them. So then again, ask yourself, are these similar to the belief that you're trying to adopt? Right? What's the belief that would help you to get the result that you're looking for? And as you think about that, notice that each one of the beliefs that we just went through is empowering, but it's only empowering if it has sufficient support. I'd like to suggest to you that whatever is the belief that you're trying to adopt, the references that support that belief are already present in your life. So going back to the client that I was working with who was trying to get a position in a different industry, we were working on that idea of, it's easy to get this position. And one way that we did that was, he made a list of difficult things that he's already done. Now you might be wondering, like why that? Well, he initially was thinking about getting a new position as something that was difficult. And so recognizing that he had already done difficult things would then support this idea that he can get this new position. And he recognized that if he's already done difficult things, then he doesn't have to do something new to create a reference that this new position is possible. It means that those things are already present in his life, that all he has to do is collect them, is capture them, capture the difficult things that he's already done. So again, what I'm suggesting to you is that whatever belief you're trying to adopt, the references for that belief are already present in your life. It's just a matter of collecting them. And that brings me to the analogy that I'd like to share with you. And he and I had fun with this. And it's the game Super Mario Brothers. I don't know if you've ever played that game. Many young people that I work with have. And in the game, Mario goes through different levels, and he is trying to achieve his goal, which is to rescue the princess. And along the way, he has to avoid hazards like enemies and pitfalls and things like that. And along the way, he can collect special items that give him different kind of powers. Okay? And so using those powers, it makes it easier for him to go through the levels to get to his goal to rescue the princess. Along the way, he can also pick up gold coins. Now, those coins are just laying there, and he doesn't have to pick them up if he doesn't want to. It's not necessary to get to the end result. They're just laying there. But what happens if he does pick them up, right? If he does pick them up, if he gets enough of them, if he gets 100 of them, then he gets a new life. And so my client and I were talking about this idea that if he collects enough references and becomes more certain about his belief, then it makes it much easier for him to get the position that he wants to get. And so collect enough references, get a new belief, get a new belief, get a new life. And again, remember, the references are already present. It's just a matter of whether you collect them or not. So as I was working with this young man, he came up with more than 15 difficult things that he had already accomplished. And then I asked him to read that list out loud, and a really interesting thing happened, right? He's reading one difficult thing after another difficult thing after another difficult thing. And he got to the end of the list, and totally unprompted, he said, well, heck, if I can do that, getting a new job is going to be easy, right? And that's the kind of thing that we were looking for. So I'm going to continue to use I can do this as an example, but just know that the same approach of collecting references can be applied to any belief that you are trying to adopt. All that's going to change is the questions for the type of reference that you're looking for. So let's go over some questions to support the belief I can do this. So it might be something like, have I ever done something similar? Right? So I have this new goal that I'm pursuing, and I want to believe that I can do this. So have I ever done something similar? And it's okay if it's not exactly the same thing. Like if you've learned to speak French, that can give you confidence in your ability to learn to speak Spanish. Even though French and Spanish aren't the same, having done something similar can give you more confidence. It becomes a reference in your ability to do the new thing. Okay? And we also talked about have I ever done anything difficult, right? And along with that might be things like, what hardships have I previously overcome? So if I'm trying to support the belief I can do this, recognizing that I've overcome hardships supports that idea. Another might be, what successes have I had in the past? And the successes can be anything. Like, and I know this is going to sound strange, but you know, were you successfully able to learn to tie your shoes, right? Yes, you were. Now, that, as an adult, that may seem like, well, that's too simplistic, but put yourself back in that position as a preschooler or a kindergartner who is learning to tie your shoes. That wasn't an easy thing at the time, but that is something that you learned, that is a success that you had. And all along your life, you've had successes like that. And one success after another success after another success, it builds up and can lend, again, a sense of certainty to the belief that I can do this new thing that you're working on. So remember the story that I shared with you in the previous presentation about starting as a therapist and seeing a client for the first time and having a lot of uncertainty about what I would do in that first session and what I would say, and that it made me nervous going into that first session. But now I've done first sessions with clients more than 1,000 times. And so I don't even think about the process. I'm just fully engaged in the process because my sense of certainty about my ability to do the first session is so high. And so just think about that over time, those with each session, each one of those sessions is a reference that supports that idea that I can do this. And in the same way, you've done things and you can collect those things that you've accomplished as references for, I can do this. Or how about if the thing that you're trying to do is something that has to be figured out? Well, in order for you to do this, you have to figure it out. Well, what have you figured out in the past? What were like complex things that you were able to sort through and to get clear about, and then to, once you figured it out, then able to do it, right? So what have you figured out in the past? Or it can be something like, have I ever learned something that would help me in this situation? Again, if I'm having to figure something out, maybe it's not, the thing isn't things that I've figured out in the past, but something that I've learned that will help me to figure out this current situation. Another type of question might be, do I know anyone else who has done it? And how am I like that person? You've probably heard people say things like, well, if they can figure out, I can, right? That's what they're drawing on. Or sometimes I've heard speakers say, I'm not all this smart. If I can do this, you can. It's that same idea. Other people and what they're able to do can become references for your ability. Another example that I think is really compelling is from the Charles Dickens story, A Christmas Carol. And you may have heard an example of this or have something similar been explained to you in the past. So a couple things are interesting to me about that story. First, it was written in 1843. That's almost 2 centuries ago. And when I think about the story, like the entire timeline of the story, the amount of time that has elapsed during the story, from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, is less than 24 hours. Now, if you're not familiar with that title, A Christmas Carol, it's the story of Scrooge. And many people who don't know the title at least know that name, right? The story of Scrooge. And as you may know, that the story opens on Christmas Eve, and Scrooge, a very miserly old man, is having interactions with his employee Bob Cratchit and is not treating Bob very well, right? So that's Christmas Eve. And then later that night, Scrooge goes to bed and he's visited by 3 ghosts: the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And as he's visited by those ghosts, the ghosts show him both the pleasure and the pain that was part of his life at an earlier time in his life, and the pain of his current circumstances. And then the ghost of the Christmas yet to come showed him the pain of his future if he didn't change his ways, which was him dying and being completely alone when he died, right? Now, based on his experience in these visitations, Christmas morning comes and he has a completely different belief about what is important. He goes from being very miserly to being very generous. Now, why would I use that as an example? The curious thing to me is, why is that story still around 200 years later? Well, the only way that I can explain that is that there has to be something that rings true about that story, right? We have to have a sense of, like, I get it. Like, if something that profound happened to me, I can see myself completely changing in that amount of time, in less than 24 hours, going through a radical shift, right? There's something that rings true about that story. Now, how is that related to adopting new beliefs? Well, sometimes the references that we can use for adopting new beliefs can be found in compelling stories Maybe it's a television show or a movie or a poem or lyrics to a song. But when it really rings true for you, even that can become a reference. So the question would be, have you ever seen it or heard it before? Even if it's a work of fiction, again, as long as it rings true, that can become a reference for you. Okay, so are there compelling stories, books, movies, TV shows, poems that can support the belief that you're trying to support? Okay. And the last question, is there anything else that tells me this is possible? That's just kind of like a cast the net wide kind of thing. Anything else that tells me this is possible? Okay, now, what I said a little bit earlier is that maybe you're trying to support a different kind of belief. Maybe it's not a belief that you can do it, but it's something else. So I want to go through just a few other different beliefs and some questions that might go along with that. So let's say that what you're working on is a relationship, right? So, and you're trying to support the idea that a great relationship is possible. I've got a number of my clients right now that are in difficult relationships, and that's the place they want to get to. They want to get to a great relationship. So they can't believe that it's even possible. It's just not going to work. So they're working on developing this belief a great relationship is possible. So what are some questions that might support that? So a question like, what great moments have we already experienced? Right? What great moments have we already experienced? As I find the great moments that we've already experienced, those become references that a great relationship is possible. Or, what difficulties have we already overcome? And again, if I can see that we've overcome difficulties in the past, it becomes references for we can overcome these current difficulties and a great relationship is possible. But maybe the belief is something different. Maybe it's that I'm trying to adopt the belief, I have the background to deliver value. So you may be familiar with the term Imposter Syndrome, right? That's when somebody's trying to do something and they don't really feel qualified to do that, right? So they're trying to support the idea that they are qualified, that they do have value that they can offer. So what kind of questions could identify references to support this belief? What could be things like, what have I already accomplished? If I can look at the things that I have accomplished, it helps me to believe that I do have the background, right? Or what does it take to develop the skills and the knowledge that I already have? Sometimes we lose sight of what we've learned, what we've gone through to learn what we've learned, what we've gone through to develop the skills. So if we can look back and look at all the things that we've gone through, again, it supports that idea that I do have a background to deliver value, okay? Or how does my skill set match what I'm trying to do? If I can identify the specific ways that my skill set helps me to do what I'm trying to do, then it is easier to believe that I have value to offer. So if you're delivering a product or a service, it might be something like, how is my skill set further along than the person that I'm trying to help? And sometimes with imposter syndrome, the sense is like, I don't really know enough. Okay, now think about this. I'm a therapist and a coach, and I've been doing it for a really long time. I've been in the helping fields for more than 30 years, and I still have occasions where if there's a book and I haven't read that book. Oh, I've got to read that book before I can talk with my next client, right? It's like I don't know everything. But what I realize is that not only do I not know everything, but I can't know everything, and there isn't anybody who can. So am I farther along than the person that I'm trying to help, right? Because the people that I'm trying to help do need help, and I've got an obligation to make sure that I'm continuing to work on my skills and continuing to work on my knowledge set. But the person that I'm trying to help is suffering, and if we can help them, even if we're just a little farther along, it may alleviate their suffering, right? So we want to make sure that something like imposter syndrome doesn't get in the way when you really do have skills and knowledge that can be helpful for others, okay? Another belief that many of my clients are trying to adopt is a belief in their own value or their own worth, okay? And one of the ideas that I work with particularly is my value is priceless. Now, how do I do that? If you're struggling with self-worth, then you're looking at what is your value, and oftentimes it's what is your value compared to other people. And when I think about value, what I think about is oftentimes the things that we consider to be valuable are valuable because they are more rare than something else, right? So it's that idea of supply and demand, right? That economic idea, right? Well, if you apply that to yourself, right? How rare are you? Well, you're one of a kind in many different ways. And so questions like, what about me can't be replicated? How are my experiences unique? How is my perspective unique? What's the potential that I have that no one else has, right? And I really believe that, right? There are 8 billion people in the world, but you are the only one with your perspective. And what that means is if your perspective isn't shared, that perspective is going to be lost to human history. It won't ever be present again. And so I would invite you to recognize your value, to recognize your preciousness, your uniqueness, right? And so that belief, my value is priceless, might be something that my clients are working on. Another one might be for those people who are in the trades or doing something like online courses or coaching. They're trying to adopt a belief that my offer is worth the price that I'm charging, right? And so the questions that can help with that is, how long would it take my client or potential client to learn to do this on their own? What would it cost them to learn to do it on their own or to be able to do it on their own? What dead ends can be avoided by the product or service that I'm offering? And what is avoiding the dead ends worth, right? There's a lot of frustration and a lot of time and money can be wasted, in dead ends. And if you are able to support somebody else and help them avoid those dead ends, then there's a lot of value in that. So those are the kind of questions that can go along with that. My offer is worth the price that I'm charging. So those are just different beliefs that my clients might be working on, and those, again, might be similar to what you're working on, or the belief that you're trying to adopt might be different. So just take a moment and think about the belief that you're trying to adopt, and ask yourself what questions would help as I'm trying to adopt this belief. What questions would develop the reference, would help me to collect the references that are already there, right? So just take a moment and think about that belief and think about what questions you could ask yourself. And as you do that, remember that 100 Mario coins gets you a new life, right? Having enough references is what takes you from uncertainty to certainty about any belief, right? And if we adopt a new belief, we get a new life. Right now, sometimes I work with people and they're able to identify the questions, or they like the questions that we come up together, but they find it difficult to answer the questions, right? They're having a hard time finding the answers. And so I have a couple of suggestions for that. One is simply write down the question, maybe on a Post-it note or something, and carry that question with you, right? And maybe when you empty your pockets, you'll see that question, and just take a moment or two and just sit with the question, right? So if it's, what difficult things have I overcome, you may not have many answers right at first, and that's okay. But as you sit with that question over time, more answers may come to you. And another suggestion would be to ask these questions to people you know and who know you well, right? So if you ask your spouse or your parents, your siblings, your friends, right, what difficult things have I overcome? They may be able to answer that question a lot more readily than you can. As we go through things, we're too close to the situation sometimes, and so we can't really see it. We have overcome difficult things. We have been able to turn things around. We have been able to learn things. We have had great moments, but we just don't recognize them until somebody else points them out, right? So carrying the question with you and just sitting with it for a few moments from time to time, or asking other people these same questions can be helpful in uncovering some of the references. And sometimes you might find that you have a hard time getting going, but once you get a few answers, then more will come to you. And so just know that can be normal as well. Okay, so a couple other things to remember. One is that that references for one belief will become references for other beliefs. So if I'm working on the belief I can do this, and I'm working on things that I've collecting references of the things that I've done, things that have been hard, or things that I've figured out, well, those references then support my belief about other things that I'm trying to do. Not only can I do project number one, but I can also do project number two. So any references that you collect are likely to have multiple values, right? That you'll be able to apply them in multiple different ways. Okay? And the image that comes to mind for me with that is if you've ever watched a news program with a sports segment. You know, what do you see in the sports segment? Well, often what you see is the greatest plays of a game or a series or something like that. It's the highlights reel, right? Well, these references that you're collecting become the highlights reel of your life, right? Here are the difficult things that I've overcome. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I've accomplished, right? And so not only does it support the new beliefs that you're trying to adopt, but it just supports the feelings of confidence that you have in yourself and your own sense of agency, right, and value. Now, going back to one of the presentations from earlier, you might remember that we talked about that as you're working on something new, that it's important to clarify the result that you are looking for, and then to skip back over the how to do it, right? Don't get caught in the how, and skip back over the feelings that are necessary to drive those behaviors. Because if we adopt the right mindset, if our thinking is aligned with the results, then the feelings are going to follow. Feelings like confidence and motivation and determination, those will follow from the sense of certainty about that belief that you're adopting, and then it's going to be much easier to figure out the how to do the thing that you're trying to accomplish, right? So sometimes we get stuck in how, and if you've ever been in that place where the result that you want and you're frustrated because you haven't gotten the result, and you've tried one thing and it hasn't worked, and you've tried something else and you're just kind of spinning, right? It's much easier to fine-tune your mindset than to figure out what's not working if you're stuck in that spinning mode. And it's much easier looking for the references. It's also much more enjoyable. Again, what you're really identifying is the highlights reel of your life. So if you're getting stuck in how to do something, you might want to pause and spend time collecting more references. As we're working with that young man as he was trying to get a job in a new industry, he was looking at two different beliefs that he was trying to support, and he felt much more certain about one of them. And as we talked about, he recognized that he had many more references for that belief than for the other one. So if you can find the references, it will increase that sense of certainty. And finding new references, again, is much easier than figuring out how if you don't have a sense of certainty in your ability to get the result that you are pursuing. So as I said at the beginning, I love this topic. It comes up so often with the clients that I'm working with. And aligning your mindset truly has the potential to change your life. So I'm happy to be able to share these ideas with you. So in conclusion, I'd really love to hear from you if this has been helpful to you. If you are thinking about these things, if it's helped you to figure out what you want, if it's helped you to figure out the beliefs and how to support the beliefs, how to get the mindset that's going to get you the results, overcome the challenges that you're experiencing. if these presentations have been helpful to you in any way, I would really love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out here on Facebook or send me an email. Also, any questions that you have about any of this material, I'd be happy to answer for you. I love talking about these things. I love helping people with these things. And if you have found it helpful, if you can think of a couple other people to share these ideas with, let them know about these presentations, let them know about our Transcend Personal Development Facebook page. It would also be really helpful if you liked our page, if you followed the Transcend Personal Development YouTube channel, follow us on TikTok. All of those things really help to be able to get the word out. And also, finally, if you're not currently working with me and you would like to, again, feel free to reach out. Until next time, remember that God is blessing you.